here where we are, I've always been lucky to surround myself with people who are smarter than myself, people that we don't even have to pay. I always took early advantage in accelerator programs, and we've been through a half a dozen different accelerator programs over the years, and mentorship programs.
In part one of my conversation with Sarah Hill, the founder and CEO of Helium, she talked about how her exposure to trauma as a journalist inspired her to create VR and AR software powered by wearable technology to help manage anxiety. In this second part of our conversation, Sarah explains why she recommends starting your company as service-based as opposed to product-based. And she also discusses some of the challenges of starting a tech company in an area of the country not typically associated with technology. So I'm excited to continue our conversation now and hear the journey that you've been on. And already in our first part of our conversation, you talked about it wasn't necessarily just a linear, it was an exploration of one problem and seeing an opportunity and then connecting with others. What kind of insight can you share of maybe some of the initial hurdles that you had to overcome, just maybe from when you were developing your first couple of VR experiences and storytelling that kind of grew past that? What can you share that helped you overcome some of those initial challenges?
Yeah, so Helium is located in a community in the Silicon Prairie. We're in the Midwest, right between St. Louis and Kansas City. It's a great group for digital creatives, but a non-traditional place for a tech company. When we tell people where a company is located, they're like, where is that? You mean they have technology there? Like, they're very surprised. They expect us, to be out in the middle of a cornfield, doing these experiences on our tractors. But the truth of the matter is that innovation and technology can happen everywhere. We also have access to the internet. The internet brings great minds, much as yourself, through video chat to us every single day. And as a broadcaster, I had already spent a great deal amount of time. We conduct most of our business in video chat anyway, even before pandemic. So, the barriers to entry in developing a company in the Silicon Prairie are not as high as you would think. The one barrier to entry is that there's not a lot of access to capital or venture capital here. In that, specifically, you can imagine as a young company, us going into an angel group that was historically not used to seeing a lot of, technology, certainly nothing with brain-computer interfaces, talking about how we're building this platform that you're going to power with your brainwaves. And, the reaction that you get from a lot of the investors, we're sure you are, young lady, you go do that. And so we quickly realized that we needed to build it, and we need to show them that, yes, you can. We are doing it. Are you going to write a check or not? So ultimately, we're able to get funding through a bunch of pitches and a bunch of no's. That a lot of them came before we actually built the product. And then once we built the product, they're like, oh, wow, you did it. We see what you're talking about here. Would
you say that to get that initial angel funding, get them on board, that MVP was kind of crucial to just show something to make that happen?
Absolutely crucial. We were trying to explain what we were doing with photos. Some of these headbands, hadn't even been out yet 5 years ago. And now EEG, this just has three little sensors on it, but EEG, electroencephalogram, essentially listening to your brain patterns, it's being baked into earbuds. So the form factor of that sensor is, really getting tiny. Which is great for us because our technology is what powers those AR and VR environments. So, as the wearables get smaller, they're being baked into the fabric. We're rooting for those hardware manufacturers. There's all kinds of, brain-computer interface hardware manufacturers out there, from Neurosity. They have a Notion, which has dry sensors that's measuring intent. It's worn on the back of the head, and you can control a computing environment with this device by thinking about lifting your right pinky. Sounds crazy, but no, you can actually do it now. This is a beta kit. Neurosity isn't out on the market yet, but we developers are playing with it. Lucid Labs, another company based out of Korea, baked sensors into a hardware, and you can control an environment with their sensors. So, all of this data, what are you going to do with that data, and how can you present it in a way that's valuable for the user?
Can you share some of the data points of, okay, we got the MVP here, the funding here, and what was that, even building the team? I mean, like, did you find the right team members first to get it started? What did that kind of timeline look like?
Yeah, so we started out as a company just creating VR and AR experiences. It was a volunteer project for a while, and then we actually made it a company, and it was our business model. We hadn't even launched Helium yet, because we started just learning how to create VR and AR experiences, and started creating some experiences for brands. Google, Facebook, and some other blue chip companies hired us to create VR and AR experiences. And so all along the way, we're learning while being paid, to do these documentaries all around the world. We've released experiences and shot experiences in Congo, China, Thailand, the Netherlands, and
were these 360 videos? Is that that were put into that?
Yeah, 360 stereoscopic videos for social purpose films. All of the stories that we like to cover has some element of value to the world, as far as shining a light on people who don't historically get coverage, whether it be people who lack mobility, veterans. We were out in Brazil with the Munduruku tribe talking about solar energy, some great experiences that we've been lucky to have over the last 3 years. But our company didn't start out as a product-based company. It started out as a service-based company. And that was really key, and would encourage other entrepreneurs to do it that way, because not only did we get unique learnings, but we had a revenue stream that could fund our product operations. And it also equipped us with a video library that we had the ability to use some of those assets in our Helium experiences. So with the client's consent, if they consented. So, that was helpful for us to have revenue, before our product was actually built.
So that's a good tactic for others can learn of using service-based revenue to grow a product company.
Right. So it was about 2 years, a year and a half to 2 years before we had our first beta that could actually be tested and out in the market, if memory serves me correctly. And we were a beta product for a really long time, just testing it. It was really buggy at first. Every update that we do, we just released one, it gets better, the connections get better, and we learn too, like how you have to turn off the Bluetooth on all of your devices when you use it. Otherwise, it can block some of those connections. But we pivoted to product, rebranded under Helium. StoryUp Studios is still out there. That's the name of our company, and we have a DBA doing business as Helium. And we still create AR and VR experiences for brands. Some of them are biometrically controlled. Some of them are custom experiences that the brand actually wants on the Helium platform. But we're just excited to have the ability to tell stories in whatever form. and to educate people about the therapeutic value of virtual and augmented reality.
The concept of scaling, which now the past 5 years sounds like you're already into that effort of scaling. What can you share with that process, that hurdle of, okay, because I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs are trying to figure that out. Any tidbits of tactics that you found have worked in order to scale?
Yeah. So be highly mentored. Here, where we are, I've always been lucky to surround myself with people who are smarter than myself, people that we don't even have to pay. So I always took early advantage in accelerator programs, and we've been through a half a dozen different accelerator programs over the years, and mentorship programs. There's a great organization called Mizzou VMS that back in 2015 took me under their wing, gave us office space, introduced us to people who could help us, discern product, business model, trajectory, funding sources, and they were our first board of directors before we had a board of directors. And so that mentorship was really valuable. And any entrepreneur out there, find someone in your industry or even not in your industry who can fill in your knowledge gaps and tell you the stones that you need to step on to get to that goal, whether it be a successful exit, scaling your company, developing a product. But I really think that's key.
Is there any podcasts or audiobooks or books that you've read that has helped you grow and keep yourself innovating and growing as a leader?
Yeah. So podcasts, yes. I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of industry podcasts primarily, and it might not have a broad appeal for your group, but I can name some for you. Kent Bai is a phenomenal storyteller. He's also a journalist away in as well, but he talks with a lot of the decision makers, creators, and has his finger on the pulse of a lot in the XR space. So would encourage you to subscribe to the Voices of VR podcast. I also, in addition to technology, I'm a person of faith. So, I like praise music. I listen to a lot of faith-based podcasts. Joel Osteen, I really love his inspiring words. Also in the technology space, if you follow Charlie Fink from Forbes, he's a great writer that writes in that. So, yes, feed myself in all of those areas. And beyond just podcasts and books, here in our community, we have at our shop what's called Nerdy Playdates. So some of the best ways to discover information is to play together with other technologists. And a lot of places have hackathons. So you might be familiar with the concept of a hackathon. But even in a hackathon, there is a pressure to create a product at the end of it. Like we're hacking this together with other people in a collaborative space to create a product. And it really takes out that element of play and that element of, look, if I turn my army man on the side and you know what I mean, and you put him on top of the house, he's able to see, around area. And this may sound really strange to someone who's never been in a Nerdy Playdate, but that's how Helium really was born, was from a couple technologists playing together with storytelling, immersive media, and neurofeedback and brain-computer interfaces. Look, when we, change the video or the color, look how it affects their physiology. Look at that. It wasn't a product. It was a play time. And the more we play as adults and as technologists, the more we discover things.
Last question for you. Overall, what kind of technology innovations do you predict we will see in the near term, the next year, and in the long term, 5, 10 years?
Yeah, so I mentioned some of them. A consumer EEG being baked into earbuds. That's a given. It's already out here right now. There are some companies that have that on Kickstarter. I haven't tried any of those products yet. I haven't gotten mine, but would love to play with them and see how they work. The rise of 5G, obviously, which is allowing for more real-time data capture from wearables, which we at Helium love because we're all about that, the biometric data controlling the experience. Sadly, the stress epidemic in the wake of COVID and how mental health is going to become more front and center. Mental health hygiene is a thing. Just like you wash your hands, we all need to be washing our brains and thinking about what are we putting into our media diets? What are we consuming digitally? And how does that make us feel? I think you'll hear more and more people talking about their media diet and how they need to be cognizant of what they're watching with their eyes on their social media feeds. Because some of that has the important ability to inform. The media is so important. I'm not saying cut off all of your social media in any way, because it has the ability to tell you who to vote for, who not to vote for. It has the ability to tell you there's a tornado in your area, a child molester next door to keep you safe. You need the media. But you also need to be mindful of that media diet, that, hearing constantly about all of the negativity in the world, and some of the things that you see on there can make you sick. And so you really need to temper that with things like Helium that have the ability to take you somewhere else.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your insight of what you're able to share. Where can people go to learn more, and what's a good first step for people to take?
Yeah, go to our website at tryhelium.com. And a reminder that helium is spelled like healing. So it's try, HEALIUM, tryhelium.com. Feel free to reach out to us directly at hello@tryhelium.com. We always love to hear from other technologists who want a nerdy play date. We love to collaborate with artists out there who are creating new pieces of digital art that could have a biometric input powered with it.
Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.